Stripping Santa by M.B. Whitehill. 1. Here's how the game is going to work, Troy said as he tied me to the chair. I'm going to be reading some of your reviews. I found a bunch that have only 1 star. I'm going to read them out loud, and if I see you crying, I will hit you. Originally, Troy had wanted me blindfolded for this game, as he called it, because he didn't want me to flinch when I saw his hand flying towards my face, but I asked him how he was going to tell if I was crying if I was blindfolded. So instead, he decided to tie me to a chair. I don't understand the point of this, I said. You want me to see the bad reviews, I could just read them myself. I could read them out loud so you know I wasn't pretending. The point of this was he just wanted an excuse to hit me. I need you to start taking this seriously, he said. Your numbers have been going down for 3 quarters in a row. Anyone else would have been kicked out of the company by now. I wondered what would happen if a complete stranger walked into the apartment right now and observed this scene. Me, tied to a wooden chair, doing my best not to look nervous, and Troy standing next to me, staring at his phone and doing his best not to look excited. This stranger would probably ask why I would allow my boyfriend to treat me this way, and I would tell them that he's actually also my boss, and would quickly try to explain that it was complicated. Pay attention, Troy yelled suddenly, snapping me back to reality. I can tell you were somewhere far away. Your head was doing that tilt it always does when you space out. A few strands of his jet black hair were hanging down in front of his face, and he quickly brushed them back. He didn't want to appear agitated, but I noticed his eye was twitching slightly. He must have been up all night planning this. I knew our revenue was decreasing, and to an extent it might be my fault, but Troy wouldn't be as bothered by this if he was anywhere near as wealthy as he wanted me to think he was. All right, let's get started, he said. I tried to sit up straight, or as straight as I could, given that this itchy rope was digging into my body, preventing me from moving. I tried desperately to seem more confident than I really was. I knew I shouldn't let any of this bother me. Everything he was going to read was just words. Who cared what some random person on the internet said about me? I could just ignore it. While some people were not hugged enough when they were children, Troy began reading, Melody clearly was hugged too often and would have benefited from a parent telling her that she is not smart or funny or attractive and she should go find a boring day job where she can keep her stupid opinions to herself. He paused and stared at me, squinting to see even the slightest hint of tears forming in my eyes, but there was nothing. Well, that one wasn't really accurate, I said. Mother almost never hugged me. Did I say you could talk? Troy asked calmly. When I asked you how that made you feel, then you can answer. If the stranger who was watching this was still here, the next thing they would ask is what kind of company allows for an employer to not only live with an employee, but also treat them like this. We lived in a civilized country that had laws to prevent this sort of thing. And I knew that once I started explaining what it is that I do, they would scoff and roll their eyes and tell me that this wasn't a real job. Okay, next one, Troy continued. People like Melody are the reason that everyone in my country hates tourists and immigrants. Go home, you stupid American, and never come back. I opened my mouth to say that that was mean, but I remember that Troy had asked me not to talk. I tried to block out what he was saying and focus on this imaginary argument I was having with this imaginary stranger. They would say that traveling around the world to different countries and filming my experiences was not a real job, it was just vacations, and the fact that I was asking the people watching to send me money made me nothing more than a hitchhiker with a phone. Or maybe a refugee. But I would argue that anything that brings in money, anything that is a source of income, could technically be classified as a job. Yes, I had good answers prepared for all of those questions. I had lots of practice from when my own relatives had asked me what it is exactly that I do. Oh, this one's neat, Troy said. But I didn't have a good answer for the next question, which was, what do you need him for? What is his role in all of this? I had the misfortune of watching all of this woman's videos from her time here in Italy. Across about 4 hours of footage, she used the term a 289 times and made the stereotypical Italian hand gesture, you know the one, 167 times. In addition, she began every single clip with "It's a me" melody and laughed every single time as if this was the funniest joke anyone had ever made. I plan on showing this footage to my grandchildren the next time they ask us why our ancestors supported Mussolini. It took all of my strength not to roll my eyes. There was no way I had said "a" that many times, and if this person was telling the truth, if they had actually taken the time to watch everything I put out, even if they did hate it, I still had their attention, which was success in its own way. The stranger would ask why I didn't just leave Troy. I'm doing most of the work on my own. What did I gain from letting him do this to me? And then they would see me crack under pressure. That's how it always was. Tricking random strangers who followed what I do to throw me a few dollars wasn't enough. I needed to bring in advertisers, and that required reaching out and asking them to give me money, something I had never been able to do. How was I supposed to convince them to give me money without seeming weak? That was something Troy never had a problem with. He was somehow able to get a new sponsor every week. A lot of these companies were strange, some of them bordered on illegal, but the money flowed in, and that was what mattered. The stranger would scoff at me, at this idea that I was scared to do that on my own and needed Troy to do it for me. They would say I should get over my fear of talking to people and become independent, work on my own. And sure, maybe I could, but I would be alone, without the backing of someone like Troy, who had an established company and a dozen girls just like me who he sent around the world. I needed him, not the other way around. He could cut me loose at any moment, throw me out of the apartment that he owned, and move in his second favorite employee. That threat loomed over me. He brought it up at the first sign of me not doing my job properly. That was what awaited me if I continued to be unprofitable. And then the stranger would say that Troy didn't sound like a boss, but rather a pimp. The Mussolini one was funny, but like a lot of them, it's a little too theatrical, Troy said. I find the best reviews are short and concise. They get right to the point. Here's my favorite one. If Melody was my daughter, I would kill myself. I'd kept my mouth perfectly still this entire time, but suddenly it twitched. No, I couldn't lose composure now. I curled my lips inward, trying to stop them from wobbling. I felt the air fill up in my mouth as I desperately tried to stop myself from exhaling, because I knew he would hear the sound, and he would know that this was the review that would break me. I squeezed my eyes. And how did that one make you feel? Troy suddenly asked. I didn't answer. I just tilted my head down. Hey, he said, and suddenly I felt his thumb right under my eye. I flinched. He was trying to see if I was crying. I said, how did that one make you feel? And a single tear rolled down my face, landing softly right at the tip of his thumb. Oh, he said calmly. Looks like that one got a reaction. And he hit me. It looks fine. I blinked. I had been staring at my reflection in the glass of wine that I was holding. I looked back at Troy, who was sitting across the table, looking just slightly annoyed. I know, I said, but even as I spoke, I felt an ache in the right side of my jaw. Instinctively, I reached up to touch it. I said it looks fine, he said, a little more sharply this time. I didn't know how to answer, so I just ended up drinking what was in my glass. Within seconds, a waiter had approached to refill it. None for her, thanks, Troy said calmly, without even looking at the person serving us. One's enough. I looked down and felt embarrassed for some reason. I waited for the waiter's footsteps to grow faint before finally looking up. Troy's attitude when we were in public was a sharp contrast to how he behaved when no one was watching. He wanted everyone to think that we got along wonderfully. All he cared about in life was what people thought of him. That's why he had spent more time making sure his hair looked just right than I had with my own. That's why he was wearing a suit that he kept shuffling in, always readjusting his sleeves because he clearly wasn't comfortable in it, but needed to wear something expensive. That's why he brought me to this restaurant where he had to book a reservation around a month in advance. Despite that, we were the only ones out here on the balcony. All of the other tables were empty. I looked into it, he said, waving his fork around at the scene surrounding us. All of these other tables are just for show. You can't actually reserve them. Oh, I said, pretending to care. It's supposed to make guests feel more important. You come here and you're the only one here and you think, wow, I guess no one else could afford to come here tonight. The restaurant was actually located in one of the poorer neighborhoods of the city, and the balcony we were on was meant to let us literally look down at the people who lived here. There were faint car horns, sirens, and the occasional gunshot in the distance, all providing ambient noise that set the mood. I did mean it, though, Troy continued. There's barely a mark on you. You look lovely. Thanks, I immediately mumbled, because I knew if I said nothing he would get irritated. You look lovely, but unfortunately we can't rely on just your looks anymore, he went on. Troy stabbed the lobster on his plate. We need to rethink our entire strategy because this isn't working. I didn't know if he wanted me to say something. He seemed to take my silence for confusion. Okay, look, he said as he took out his phone. He swiped a few times, then flipped it around to show me a picture of a graph with a red line that started at the top left corner and slowly but surely made its way to the bottom right. See that? He asked. That's you. That's the ad revenue you're bringing in. It's getting smaller and smaller. If the red line goes up, that's good. But yours keeps going down. He had this way of talking to people like he thought they were stupid, but he didn't make it too obvious. What happens if we keep losing money? He asked, putting his phone away. How do you think we survive? We got bills to pay. You could ask your dad for help, I muttered quietly. I had seen our waiter approaching again, and that was the only reason I felt brave enough to say this. If there hadn't been a witness, he might have hit me again. I don't need my dad's help, Troy said through gritted teeth. I saw his chin wobble just slightly as he spoke, and his hand clenched his fork tightly. I don't need his money. I have solved bigger problems on my own before. You think I built this company by asking him for help? No, I did this all on my own. $500,000, that's what I poured into this, and it's all mine. It's all raised from the last company, which I also built on my own, so stop telling me I should run to him for help. I get that you're angry for how I treated you, but that doesn't mean you can. And he just went on and on, trying desperately to convince me that what I had just said didn't bother him. He had, of course, conveniently left out that the first company he started did require $2 million from his dad, which made the $500,000 he had just mentioned seem much less impressive. $500,000 to start a company that was just him sending attractive women on vacations and having them document what they saw and where they went. That was his crowning achievement. I knew he wouldn't ask his dad for money because he was too proud, but even beyond that, I imagine his dad would laugh if Troy explained what this company actually does. And it was almost funny watching him blather for minutes like this. How things had turned around. Just hours ago he was trying to make me cry, but now he was the one desperately trying not to lose his composure. He looked like a child right now, complaining about how he was a big boy. "I'm canceling your Brazil trip, by the way," he said. That brought me back to reality. My eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "You're not going. I'm sending one of the other girls," he said. Somehow this almost hurt more than him actually hitting me. "But I was already set to go," I said. "It's in 2 days. We already paid for everything." "You're not going," Troy said firmly. "And we didn't pay for everything. I did." I sighed. I didn't want to start crying, but I needed to think of something. Spending Christmas in Brazil had been one of the few things I had to look forward to in a long time. "You're punishing me for my performances," I said, "but you're not giving me an opportunity to do better. How can I turn this around if I don't get to go anywhere?" "You are going somewhere," Troy said, "just not a country far away. No, we have to bring you back down to earth." "What do you mean?" "All right," he sighed. "Let me ask you a simple question. Why do you think people are interested in your work? Why do they read about all the cool places you've seen, the things you get to do? Why do they watch videos of you doing the most mundane tasks in some faraway place?" I sat quietly and stared down at my empty plate. He hadn't allowed me to order anything. He had noticed that I ate more when I was stressed, so he had put me on a new diet that reversed that. Only eat when you're happy. Problem was I was never happy. "It's not a trick question," Troy said. "You know the answer. You can say it." "Because they think I'm hot," I mumbled. "See, that wasn't so hard," Troy said, leaning back in his chair. "But there's more to it than that. There are plenty of hot people who can do this job. How can you stand out from the crowd?" I shrugged, not sure if I was again supposed to know the obvious answer. "You have to be relatable," he explained. "Imagine you're some guy who spends 8 hours a day in an office. You come home, turn on your phone, and your feed is filled with videos of someone way more attractive and successful and happy than you, getting paid to just stumble around the world from one scenic vista to another. How can you watch that and not want to blow your brains out, knowing the mundane cycle of work that awaits you forever?" "I don't know," I said. "Make them laugh?" "Not quite," Troy said. "Give them hope. You need to convince them that you're just like them, except you've managed to escape the boringness of the real world and you're now living your life. And they can be on their way to do that too. Any day now. Their life is going to turn around." "So lie to them?" I asked. Troy frowned and scratched his chin. "No, not lie. You're not flat out saying these things, but you're nudging them in the right direction. And there's the problem. You're not relatable. People watch you and think you're just some dumb blonde who's had everything handed to her." He was again explaining all this to me like I was a child. "Okay, so how do we fix it?" I asked quietly, trying not to show how much all of his words bothered me. "They need to learn some things about you," he said. "Things they don't know. Things I don't even know. Think about it. We've been living together for what, 8 months? And if someone were to ask me something about you, I have no idea what to tell them. I don't know anything about your family or where you're from because you never want to talk about it. If someone asked you about me," I interrupted, "your bigger problem would be explaining that I work for you and that we live together. Lots of companies do that," he immediately said, waving the subject off, "especially startups. They can't afford rent space without all living together in a room. And that's beside the point. The same way I know nothing about you, the people who watch you also know nothing. It's like you're not even a real person. You're almost like a fake character invented so we have something to present in front of a camera." I said nothing. The last thing I wanted to do was talk about my family on the internet. "You still have doubts," Troy went on. "Come on. I've told you about my family and where I'm from. You can do the same." "I'm from New York. I've lived here for years," I said firmly. "We've been over this. But before you were an adult, you were a child," Troy said. "I don't want to talk about my childhood," I snapped, and immediately winced as I worried whether this would make him angry. "Well, you're going to have to," he said. Troy took a long sip of his wine. "Come on. What can be so bad about it?" he asked. "I won't judge you if you're from a certain state or whatever." I hesitated. I had taken my hometown and buried it deep within my mind, as well as all of the relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. It was a place I never even wanted to think about. Sometimes I felt as though I had made all of it up and it never existed. "Reindeer Falls," I said finally. "That's where I'm from." "Never heard of it," Troy said with a frown. "Thank God for that." "It's a small town," I said. "There's not much there." "Well, you better hope that's not the case because you'll be spending Christmas there," he said. My heart sank. "Absolutely not," I shook my head. "It's not a request," said Troy. "You're going back home for the holidays. This is you being relatable. You're going back to the town you grew up in. You're going to explore your childhood home and talk about how much it's changed since you were a kid. And you're going to rekindle all of the relationships with all of these relatives you've been avoiding for years. That will be the tension and drama. That's what people will want to see. You facing problems they can relate to because they're going through similar problems. I'm not saying I would rather die than go back to that place, but it would be a hard choice," I said. Troy raised an eyebrow. "Would you rather get fired? Because that's what's going to happen. Your ad revenue has been decreasing for 3 quarters in a row. One more and you're done." Troy stood up, finished the rest of his wine, and took out his wallet to leave a tip. You'll be out on your own. I'll move one of the other employees in. That was always the looming threat. At any moment, he could fire me, kick me out, and then move his second favorite employee in, one of the dozen other girls he sent on trips around the world. I had never met any of them. It was discouraged. He didn't want us sharing ideas, which probably meant he mistreated all of them. I'd seen pictures of them, however. They all looked similar to me, close enough that anyone could tell he had a type, but different enough that people could still tell us apart. All pale blondes with perfect smiles who looked as though they had never experienced a single inconvenience in their lives. But I could see all of the other ones had something Troy would consider an imperfection. One's eyebrows were too thick, one's chin was too pointy, one was a bit heavier, but not me. I knew I was his idea of perfect. Me going back to that place is a disaster waiting to happen, I said. Or is that what you're hoping for? You don't want low revenue to be the official reason you fire me, so you're hoping there's some sort of family drama that you can use as an excuse. A little drama can be good, Troy said. In fact, it'll help you showcase that you're growing as a person and overcoming problems. It's all part of the story you're telling. This is a good idea, you going home. You shouldn't be so quick to dismiss my ideas. He walked over and lifted my chin up with one finger. Think about how far you've gotten because of me.